welcome back to my library tour that I've been doing. If you haven't seen the other videos, I'm going to be moving soon and I'm just going through my books before we move, showing you the chaos and then I'll show you how they're organised once we've moved house. I'm up to the poetry shelf. There are a lot of books crammed in here and a lot of them are very small books as well. Such as the nature of poetry collections, I guess, so I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as I can. I'll start with these two piles sort of on the side here. They're sort of the Faber and Faber editions. Particularly the new ones. I quite like the way they look and feel. And then we have sort of miscellaneous editions and things behind, which I'm sure I'll get to. So I'll start here. There are a couple of things that aren't Faber first. There's a literary magazine, the New Welsh Review, that I was published in recently, and this is Stephen Fry's The Ode Less Travelled, which is a very fun. I mean, you probably know Stephen Fry, a very famous man, and he secretly has been writing poetry just for himself, and the idea of the book is just to get you enjoying writing poetry, even if it's just for yourself, which I think is a very valuable thing. Right, then we have some T.S. Eliot. We have his selected poems, which is pretty much everything except for four quartets. I guess it kind of skims over some of the early stuff. My knowledge of some of his earlier work maybe isn't what it should be, but I'll probably need to get a more comprehensive collection of his work. But then we have four quartets, so his kind of last poetic work, and then I have The Wasteland, his own edition, which was a little Christmas present I got for myself quite a few years ago now. Then we have the selected poems of W.B. Yeats. Lovely cover, and this is a book that I find myself coming to all the time. John Berryman's Dream Songs. This is like the first kind of edition of them, the first 77 that he published. I didn't particularly get on with them, but I want to revisit them and see what I think. And Sylvia Plath, one of my favourite poets. So I have Ariel here, which I've read a couple of times, and this is poems selected by Carol Ann Duffy, so just a kind of selection over her career, which was kind of my introduction to her poetry. And this is Don Patterson's Orpheus, his kind of version of Rilke's sonnets to Orpheus. Not quite a translation, but not quite inspired by, kind of in between. Then we have some Seamus Heaney, sort of both editions of his new selected poems. So this is the earlier stuff, 1966 to 87, and this is 1988 to 2013, and I absolutely adore these books. I think some of my favourite poems of his are actually in the later half, but as a whole, I much prefer the first half, and this is like one of my desert island books. Then we have Simon Armitage. We have his selected poems called Paper Aeroplane, I think this is one of the few signed books that I have. And then one of his collections, The Unaccompanied, which is one of my favourite recent poetry collections. Also by him, it's actually up here because I'm planning to read it soon, hopefully, is Kid, which is a poetry, I think one of his earlier poetry collections from the late 90s, early 90s, 1992, so maybe his second or third collection maybe. And we have some Philip Larkin, a few poems of his I like, but I don't particularly enjoy Larkin, or his kind of fellow movement poets. I don't particularly like him. Then we have Paul Muldoon. So this is a fairly recent collection, like 2016 I want to say. Let's have a look. 2015. Yeah, this is pretty good. The first poem in here, which is called Cuthbert and the Otters, is really a kind of elegy for the death of Shimasini. Then my favourite collection, which is Hay, and another that was quite fun, called The Annals of Chile. This was pretty good, but he always kind of bewilders me, Paul Muldoon, and I kind of like the fact that he bewilders me, but in all of his strange, complicated things going on in the poems, there's normally some heart there underneath, some emotion, that when you spend time with it you find, and yeah, it's quite remarkable the way he manages to do that. And then we have Derek Walcott. I've only dipped into this so far. Yeah, I don't really know much about Derek Walcott, so yeah, I thought this would give me an idea. And then this is an interesting one. This is To Provide All People, a poem in the voice of the NHS by Owen Shears, a Welsh poet. And it's a poem about the NHS, the British National Health Service. It came out a few years ago, and it was actually done as like a poem film on the BBC. And you have these different characters who move through the poem. Yeah, just kind of telling you their stories and what the NHS means to them. And it might seem a bit, I don't know, I don't want to say cheesy, but it's just a bit twee maybe, but it is actually quite, it does hit quite hard in places, and you realise how special the NHS is. And it's kind of doing three things. So it's kind of telling you the story a bit of Aneurin Bevan, who was the man who sort of spearheaded the foundation of the NHS, and then it's telling you the stories of people who are living around the time that the NHS sort of began, and seeing how it totally transformed their lives, but also telling stories of people working there and people receiving care in the present, and maybe the ways in which the NHS is under threat. So it was very, very political actually, very of the moment, but yeah, I thought it was quite interesting and quite well done. Then we have a handful of Hughes. Ted Hughes, one of my favourite poets. We have birthday letters, which I'll just find Sylvia Plath. I quite like that Faber did this. So this is Ariel, and then we have birthday letters, and the colour scheme is not quite the same, but it's nearly there, it's nearly the same, kind of in conversation with each other in the way that birthday letters is in conversation with Sylvia Plath's Ariel, which I thought was yeah, very satisfying, very well done. Then we have Wadwell, sort of an earlier collection, his third collection of poetry, which is really strange. It has short stories and radio plays in here, along with the poems, and it's kind of a collection of transformation. He's trying to move towards the kind of poetry he'd be writing in Crow, which is very bleak and black and brutal and kind of grotesque, but really good. And then this is, I suppose, much later on, sort of animal poems for children. This is called The Iron Wolf, and yeah, it's not that great to be honest, but quite fun, and then a later work, this is Tales from Ovid, so a sort of his version of some of the tales from the Metamorphoses, and just his new selected poems, just kind of a taste of his work, just if I want to dip in and out. Then we have some Wallace Stevens, which I haven't really read much of yet. I've enjoyed what I've read of Wallace Stevens so far. Then Kingdomland by Rachel Allen, fairly recent collection, and it was okay. Yeah. And a poet a contemporary poet who is up there for one of my favourites is Alice Oswald. So this is her collection Woods, etc. from I think the early 2000s. Where will it tell me? Should say here 2005. Yeah, so it was pretty strong, but then this kind of blew me away. This is Dart, and it's telling the story of the River Dart from its source all the way to the sea, and all the stories and the lives that depend on it. And it was really interesting and not at all romantic. You know, very real. Yeah, it was good. And then there's Stranger Baby by Emily Berry, which is a very solid recent collection of poetry. Then we have some Walt Whitman. It's a poem selected by Donald Hall. And this was kind of my introduction to Walt Whitman, and used to take it on, take it with me on walks and stuff. And this is Salt Water by Andrew Motion. I didn't particularly get on with this, to be honest. Yeah, I found it a bit boring. Yeah. And then this is Philip Gross, The Son of the Duke of Nowhere. A collection from the 90s. I'm not sure if you can get your hands on it anymore, but I thought it was quite good. This is Marianne Moore's Complete Poems, a poet I want to get to know more, no pun intended. And we have some W.H. Auden. Again, I want to know his work better than I do. I only read a handful of Auden's poems. Then we have W.S. Graham, his new collected poems, and I was really impressed when I read his new selected poems, which is a much thinner selection of his work, whereas this more or less covers everything he ever wrote. So I'm excited to plunge in. Then this is in parenthesis, kind of somewhere on the border between a lyrical novel and and a long sort of epic poem, and it's kind of surreal, and it's the experience of a soldier in World War One, and I think it keeps on shifting perspective. Like at some points it's in the first person, maybe, and at other points the third person. But it's really good, but confusing. And then there's Ilya Kaminsky's Death Republic, which I think I talked about in a past video, and I thought it was pretty solid. And we have some Ezra Pound, which again I've read a few poems, but I want to get to know his poetry a bit better. And then just before I finish, I just got out these poetry magazines. Yes, this is Poetry magazine, so based in Chicago. I suppose one of the bigger poetry journals, and I was subscribed for about a year, so from December 2019 up until last August, and then I didn't renew the subscription just because I wasn't keeping up very well. I enjoyed the first few, but was just finding the volume of stuff coming my way and keeping up with other stuff that I wanted to be reading, and other things just a bit too much. Yeah, and I guess with any sort of magazine, journal of poems, you're going to meet stuff you like, you're going to meet stuff you don't like, and it's just about dipping your toe in, I guess, and seeing what you enjoy. But on the other hand, now I have a year's worth of this magazine, and I have all the time in the world to change my opinions on certain poets that I didn't enjoy the first time I read them, but I have their stuff, and I can change my mind. Yeah, so we'll see, I suppose. And then we have another poetry magazine here. Well, it's not just poetry actually, they do sort of short stories and things too. This is Lucent Dreaming, so they're based here in Cardiff, I think, at least in South Wales, and yeah, they kind of specialise more in sort of surreal kind of stuff, I suppose. This is another publication I was published in once, and yeah, my first ever published poem was in here, and Actually, if you look at this, this is I'll show you the back so you can see it a bit better. That's one of the sort of government buildings in the centre of Cardiff. And it's in the area of Cardiff where the university was. So I used to sit in lectures kind of a stone's throw from this very austere looking building. But that's that for now, and I'll come back with more from the poetry shelf. I'll see if I can get through the rest in one video, we'll see. But thanks for watching, I hope you found it interesting, and yeah, please let me know what you thought in the comments. Alright, take care, bye bye.